of sustainable wood and timber products as a solution to the net zero transition and what it means. We've got a great mix of representatives from across the supply chain from different parts of the system and from different countries as well, which is excellent. So what I'm going to do is pass to panel members to give a quick introduction about who they are, their organisation, what their day job sort of entails, to get a bit of a sense of kind of where they fit in the system. And then Amy's going to give a bit of a short presentation, but we'll do introductions first, and then we'll come back to Amy. But Amy, over to you first.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Amy Duchel, a Senior Forestry Officer at FAO. I lead the Forest and Climate team.
Hi, Michael Taylor, sixth generation grazier and agroforester from the east coast of Australia.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Rachel Miller. I'm from Wellington, New Zealand. I work there as the Environmental Manager at Forest Owners Association. We're the industry body for tree growers in New Zealand.
Hi, I'm Francisco Ruiz Tagle. I'm from CMPC from Chile. This is an integrated forest company with operation in several countries in Latin America, and one of our businesses is, of course, the wood products business that we're mainly for exports.
Hello everyone, my name's Harry Mills. I work for Built by Nature. I'm campaign manager there. It's an NGO based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, originally from Brisbane in Australia. I'm very happy to be here. Let's crack on.
Great, thanks Harry. So in addition to a game of Guess Who, we're going to play a game of Pass the Mic this afternoon. So this is going to be excellent, but I'll pass to Amy to help set the scene a bit more and I guess give a perspective from the FAO as well. But over to Amy.
Well, thank you so much. And on behalf of FAO, I would like to thank the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry of the Australian government for this invitation. And I would particularly like to recognize my colleague, Thais Linhares Juvenal, who really leads this work at FAO. We just have a tiny delegation here in Belém, and so I'm representing the overall forestry division in this space. But it's really her work and her team's work that I'm discussing today. This morning, and I think our other colleagues in the panel will talk about this, but there was a launch of the COP30 acceleration plan, Building for Forests, Accelerating Wood-Based Construction for Climate, Forests, and Livelihoods, led by the Sustainable Wood for a Sustainable World initiative, the Forest Climate Leaders Partnership, and Built by Nature, who is represented in the panel by Harry Mills. And I think this acceleration plan is very important, and actually what the COP30 presidency has done for many of these activation groups is very important, because they've so nicely aligned the action agenda with the outcomes of the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement and really thinking about implementation until 2028. And so all of us who are part of the different axes of the agenda were challenged to bring together coalitions and show how we were going to deliver solutions until 2028, until the next global stocktake. And this Building for Forest plan really does it. It's bringing together more than 20 organizations from public and private sectors, international organizations, academic institutions, and civil society. And it builds on a lot of these other initiatives, from FAO, FCLP, and others, and the Global ABC, the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction. So I think this issue, I think this is my 15th COP or something like that. And this issue of sustainable wood, I've really seen maybe in the last 5 years as something that, maybe even less. I mean, maybe really since Sharm el-Sheikh, actually, I would say. So is that maybe not, maybe less, where the forestry coalition around sustainable wood has really come together and started to elevate this issue to the political level in the context of climate change, especially climate mitigation, understanding that the construction and building sector, is the largest GHG emitter with, over a third of global emissions, and that really a new generation of wood products and substitution could help support that transition to low emissions building. But there's a lot of issues with this, and as soon as I tell many of my forestry friends, that I'm on a panel about sustainable wood, they always say, yeah, well, where is this going to come from? You know, where do you get all of this supply, and how is it going to be managed? And are you getting rid of? Are you risking the carbon sink for a storage elsewhere? And so I think this perception we really have to keep working on. I mean, first of all, in many countries, timber's not considered a very good construction material, and it's a low quality, considered a low quality construction material, and many building codes are just and other structures are not in line with helping promote this agenda. And there really is still a very strong association between wood and deforestation, especially when you think of it that way. Okay, we're taking wood out of forests and putting it into something that's considered low quality and would start to emit very quickly, and it would not actually store carbon over the long term. There's a lot of questions around that. And I think there's a lot of, you know, even though the IPCC has released guidelines around harvested wood products, there's a lot of uncertainty around those estimates. So I think it's very important for any of you or anyone you know who is part of the 7th assessment cycle of the IPCC. Actually, this is a wonderful moment to ensure that this issue is in there. So talk to any scientists you know who are working in the mitigation chapters and the AFALU chapters, because this could be something that's really elevated, and then you start to diminish some of the uncertainties. And this would be the exact moment to do this. The IPCC, the 3 working groups are just starting their work right now. And then the third issue is really the cross-sectoral nature of the issue, is so that many of us are coming very much from the forestry sector in you know, sustainable forest management, and this is a different crowd, the buildings and construction sector. And so hopefully this plan to accelerate solutions can start to really bring together those different sectors. And it's, you know, there's a huge opportunity here. We really hope this Building for Forest plan, you know, it will only be as good as the engagement around it over the next 3 years. So I would just, you know, FAO certainly stands ready to support in anything we can do. We will be having our next COFO, the Committee on Forestry, in late September next year. We can certainly continue to elevate this issue with our members and, you know, stand ready to also you know, help with anything that's needed around advocacy, including through the Sustainable Wood for a Sustainable World initiative. So that's it from my side.
No,
thanks.
Thank you, Amy. That was you crammed a lot into a few minutes there, so thank you for doing that. And I guess taking a step back, looking at this panel, we've got great representation from across the supply chain, from the farm gate through to industry associations, processing, paper and pulp mill corporation. And Harry, I think best describing your role as sort of the innovation, sort of R&D type perspective. I may have sort of got that slightly wrong, but you can correct me when I get to you. And of course, a multilateral perspective as well. So I think that makes me kind of the outlier on the panel, but I'll do my best to keep the conversation going. And I might start with you, Michael. I guess starting at the farm gate, really. And I think you kind of undersold yourself in the introduction in terms of like. Your farm business and the journey your family farm's gone on over many decades. But I guess starting at the farm gate, like thinking about your family business's journey around agroforestry, which is not just what you do. You've got, I think you mentioned merino wool, probably beef cattle. It's a diverse family business. I think agritourism as well. So very diversified sort of farm business portfolio. I guess maybe if you can set the scene a bit in terms of like the journey your farm business went on to get to this point and where you're at now.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, starting at the farm gate. Well, so like I said, 6th generation farmer. We're better known for our ultrafine merino. And I'm actually here with the Farmers for Climate Action, but I'm here mostly talking about food systems. So I'm actually a larger food producer than I am a fibre producer, but over the last 40 years, timber has obviously become a more major enterprise. How's that? A more major enterprise for us on farm. But we actually, when we started planting trees back in the 80s, so that was my parents, my grandfather had gone from clearing trees to starting to replant trees. We're in an area, the New England tablelands on the east coast of Australia's high plateau at 1,000 metres, graziers came there originally because it was beautiful open woodland, wooded ridges, a lot of stringy bark, eucalyptus caligonosa on the ridges. So great building timber, good for building yards and fences, and sheds. And then, but over the years, a lot of that got cleared. Eventually, between the 50s and the 80s, we kind of broke the ecosystem, and that our whole region suffered from dieback. And it's been interesting. There's a lot of parallels here in Brazil. The development of agriculture over here has been very rapid, from being food insecure back in the 90s through to now. So but a lot of farmers in just one generation are seeing a lot of the issues that we've seen over multiple generations. So it's been exciting. The last, so between the 80s and I guess now, we've replanted our property from about 5% tree cover. So the tablelands used to be around 25-30% tree cover, and we've brought our property back from 5% up to 25% nearly. And but we started planting trees just for shade and shelter for our livestock. It just happened that back in the 80s, the only knowledge of planting trees was from the forestry industry. We actually had a state forests nursery just down the road, and it was the choice between $2 or $3 eucalypt seedlings or 15-cent pine seedlings, and when you're planting 10 to 20,000 trees a year, and there was no funding, we were doing that just for our own business. Pine trees was a pretty good option. Luckily, the Kiwis had done a lot of development just over the ditch, and we were able to learn a lot about growing, managing those radiata pines for timber. So 10, 15 years later, we were already starting to harvest pine trees for treated round timber. So we had a small peeling mill on our property. And then in 2004, we bought another Kiwi product, a Mahoe sawmill. And we've been doing sawn and treated timber since 2004, and that's added quite a serious enterprise to our property, especially during the 2019 drought. So we probably got down to about a third or less of the stock numbers that we'd normally run, and if you think about it, merino wool being our main product, that's a fairly big cut to our income. So having the timber business was really important to the resilience of our farm business and it was great to be able to, for my mental well-being, able to go into a nice forest with green grass, while everywhere else was quite apocalyptic at that time. So yeah, that's kind of where we're up to. We've learnt a hell of a lot along the way, and there's been a whole lot of other things come out of the tree planting. So yeah, and that's, I guess, why I'm here.
Great. Thanks, Michael. So I think you provided a few segues there to sort of introduce go to our New Zealand panellist. Is Michael's story sort of something you sort of observed a lot in New Zealand, and as a sort of more of an industry association body, sort of what are some of the I guess the trends you've seen from a New Zealand perspective, and where New Zealand's at today in this space?
Yep. So New Zealand, we have 1.8 million hectares in pine trees. Our forestry sector is 90% Pinus radiata, so it grows really well, and we are quite early in terms of our use of mass timber and these high value add products. So traditionally in New Zealand, our buildings are built from framed with wood, and our Building Act had to undergo a bit of scrutiny, a bit of extra regulatory loopholes, hoops to jump through to get to the point where we could build with mass timber. But I think one of the biggest problems that we have in New Zealand in terms of upscaling with mass timber and really embracing that is that New Zealanders, the general public, don't realise the carbon and the ecosystem services embodied in that timber. So they could sit at a wooden table with a wooden pencil, blowing their nose on a tissue, and not realise how much carbon is embedded in their day-to-day lives. And that's what we need to correct. That's what we need New Zealanders to understand, to really embrace this mass timber movement and realise that it's not just the wood, it's the ecosystem and the carbon services that come along with that timber. So that's where we're at in terms of mass timber.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Francisco, I guess your business has a long history. I think sort of nearly a century or more. How have you sort of seen the industry you work in sort of change, and I guess bring you back to today, sort of where your company is at, and some of the trends and opportunities you sort of see today from a sustainable wood timber industry perspective?
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, our business is 125 years old. We have been in the industry for many, many years, and basically based on also for timber radiata pine. We start business in nurseries, of course, with the highest technology that we have, and then we also, as some others mentioned, we have a very concrete sustainable management of the forest. So this is a great opportunity for growing this business. And the trend I have seen is probably we are in the part of the world where the construction in wood is not really, it's not considered a good construction. And so we have to continue working on that. And I would define three different things. Consider that Chile is important producing wood, but our most important market is the United States, is Canada, is Europe, but it's not South America. And I would say three things. That we have some regulatory limitations. Probably in many countries we see the same thing. The codes are extremely demanding for construction in wood, probably 3 or 4 more times compared with cement or with concrete. Much more demanding because it's seen as something is considered in some ways a weak, raw material, which is totally incorrect. The other thing is that we have seen in several markets that we need to create some more technical or professional knowledge about construction in wood. We have seen several markets where still the architects, engineers are better construction steel and concrete, but they have problems for considering wood in their processes. And finally, I also would mention some cultural issues. Probably there were some countries like our country, where the construction was mainly created in concrete and steel. And so I believe it's something that we have to continue working on with universities, with the academy. And of course, the trend, in my opinion, is that it's a good trend. I'm seeing that today we are considering much more combination between wood products and steel, for instance. But still there is a big room to grow. If I can tell you some figures, probably in the United States and Scandinavia, for instance, 80% or between 70 and 80% of the construction is wood. And most of the countries in the rest of the world is below 50%. So there are many countries now, creating some particular law and incentives for improving this. So my opinion is that the trend is getting better.
That's great. Thank you, Francisco. Harry's bringing you into the conversation. I guess perhaps expanding a bit more on kind of what Built by Nature which is, and also I guess reflecting on some of what you heard around across the supply chain, some of the trends and observations, I guess the work that Built by Nature and you sort of do in this space. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. And everything that's been said resonates greatly with me. And it's funny how a lot of the problems and opportunities are really quite common in all the different regions. And Built by Nature, it's quite a new NGO. It was set up 2022, so 3 or 4 years old, for the Loudest Foundation in the Netherlands as a network and grant matchmaker, and has 6 networks across Europe to drive and push the timber movement and other bio-based materials forward. through that, it has been stimulating and creating opportunities with front-runner organisations ranging from insurers to designers, encompassing architects, engineers, real estate developers, and other actors. And you know, there's many trends in many of our networks where we can see there's been a significant uptake and a number of buildings and metrics you can refer to as such. Globally, I think it's, and in these arenas, I would reflect on the earlier comments as, okay, how long has timber been here, or how long has there been a discussion of positive forestry or forest positive? And for me personally, this has been something we've been working with the Global ABC, with the Bio-Based Materials Working Group, with Built by Nature and at the University of Cambridge for a number of years to get a level playing field. There is representation and different actors. The forest sector has been mobilised through a number of actors. Most recently, I would say ISFC has brought industry in and done quite well. But for the building sector, for lightweight frame through to mass timber, that's still yet to properly mobilise. And today we were fortunate to have many excellent speakers at the launch of the Building for Forests Acceleration Plan as part of Activation Group 12, which fundamentally is built off what Built by Nature has been working on now for 2 years, the principles for responsible timber construction. That's a big package of work that we have been delivering for initially the FCLP, Greening Construction of Sustainable Wood Initiative, which Australia is a member of. And we have received, to date, just over 15 national government endorsements. Today, publicly, Brazil coming on board. And as part of the principles, these are unifying language. And the CEO, Paul King, is in the audience here, and I would urge anyone who's interested to come have a chat with Paul, because he's a great communicator of the principles. But fundamentally, they're unifying language. It's about bringing together all the different stakeholders to bring and represent the move at greater levels. One of the big areas of work for this year, personally for me, has been the Built by Nature Prize. We had near 400 applications of building projects from right around the world, of timber exemplars which align to the principles. And we, we had many different typologies, residential, of single dwelling through to multi-res of 3, 4 through to high-rise. Now, we brought a number of those architects here to Rio for the C40 Local Leaders Forum, then to Sao Paulo to our events there, and in here at the COP, and giving them that platform to be spokespersons, to talk for all the different aspects they need to be advocating for timber construction is unrivaled. So that's the advocacy angle I can sort of wrap up. The other plug I would give is that there is, recently we've premiered and produced a film with Open Planet Studios, Our Future, Built by Nature, which has followed the story of these architects and the buildings, and is a narrative piece of 20 minutes. Fundamentally, I think that innovation, or the other aspects of the question, I can draw on a little bit. It really depends on where the region you're looking at. In the UK, where I'm based at the moment, it's just been renewed and had died down a little bit, but I mean there was quite a progressive timber construction roadmap which led for significant R&D at universities through to industry to mobilise and get involved, brought together stakeholders. Built by Nature itself, with its network in the UK, brought demand-side actors in. And wherever we've travelled as Built by Nature globally, there's interest and keenness to see how that can expand into the region we're in. And here in Brazil in the last couple of weeks, we've seen that with the Nuclear de Madeira, essentially based in Sao Paulo, with many different actors, and we visited a handful of mass timber buildings in the region. And my connection to Brazil goes back more than nearly 15 years now, and I can see that there has been a significant uptake in timber construction here in mass timber in the last 5, and it's very impressive. Is it enough? Not yet, but it is progressing, and it is doing well. East Africa, and there's plenty of work there, and Southeast Asia. But I'm going to hand it back over to.
Great.
Yeah.
No, thanks, Harry. I guess advocacy is going to be sort of clearly very important in this space. And Rachel, you mentioned sort of one of the key sort of challenges in New Zealand's context was around, I guess, sort of comms, marketing, changing consumer perceptions, and those types of market sort of challenges. I guess, how are those types of things? Is that sort of an industry role? Is that a sort of where government and government regulation needs to kind of align? What's the low-hanging fruit there?
I think everybody needs to be involved. So a great example from New Zealand is our government and our industry worked together to design an industry transformation plan for the forestry and wood processing sectors. It's a roadmap for New Zealand's bioeconomy. So it's about generating high-value wood products. It's about alternative bioproducts like biopharmaceuticals, biofuels, bioplastics, all those innovative and new and exciting things. And so it was a really clever plan because it was built with the government and the private sector alongside each other with an equal level of commitment to uplifting and promoting New Zealand's bioeconomy. So I think that was a real success in New Zealand.
And Francisco, I guess building off that from your perspective, like what are some of the other demand side opportunities that would just like, while government regulation sort of catches up, like what are the demand side opportunities to really, I guess, bring that sort of pull through so that I guess there's clear market signals for people like Michael to keep on planting, I guess. So I might go to Francisco first on that.
Okay, well, let me tell you my opinion on this. I would say that wood products for construction are getting more and more sophisticated in some way. And so in our particular case, we have been advancing and producing a more sophisticated product like a CLT specific with some very specific specification, very particular for some kind of constructions. I would say also glulam and other value-added products of wood. And this is a way, I would say, to respond to the demand. The demand is asking for products that in some way replace the old tradition of cement and steel. And we have to be able to transmit that the good products are also good for seismic countries, for fires. Today you have the technology, so I would say still we have room for transmitting in a better way the technology we are incorporating in our industrials.
And I guess now returning this to the farm gate, Michael, although as you mentioned you sort of do processing on farm now as well, which is quite impressive. Are you seeing more of your neighbours or more of your kind of peers sort of venturing into this space? And if not, I guess what would sort of entice them to explore this from like a farm business perspective, the ability to diversify farm income and also support sort of these broader kind of global priorities around sustainable timber products and decarbonisation?
The million-dollar question. It's at the moment there's really no incentive for farmers to be planting trees on their farms, and even more at this moment in Australia with the livestock market drastically up. It's not on farmers' minds at all, really. They can make money, a lot more money other ways. And I think I saw some stats the other day. I think it's only like 2.2% of the land has been. It's a very small percentage of money that's gone into environmental planting or farm forestry projects for carbon credits. So, but like I said, our region, the whole region's still sitting at less than 5% tree cover. But having done a logging operation a few years ago on our place, so we had to go at selling just the logs rather than processing them ourselves. And a lot of them were going at least 4 or 5 hours from where we are, and a lot of the logs were going 8 hours away. We were getting, for a lot of our logs, and we didn't know for 7 weeks how many logs had been harvested and what grade they were, what price we were going to get, and when we were going to get paid. you can sell one sheep or 10,000 sheep. You pretty much know what you're going to get in the sale yards, and you can nearly work out what the person that buys them is going to make out of them, and that's within a few days. So there's a lot of issues with the selling of timber for small or even for big farms, but for smaller forestry enterprises, and in the end we actually had to pull up the export of the logs off our farm because we realised a lot of our logs were being downgraded to pulp. And we'd been told the timber was quite good quality, and then they're getting downgraded. We had absolutely no control over that, and I realised that I could do it worked out as a 27,000% value add by taking a pulp grade log and turning it into a rough sawn piece of timber in my sawmill, and just because of the distance to processing. So I've found, I've been on an Nuffield scholarship the last year, and my research topic was around the barriers to agroforestry in grazing and cropping areas. And I found usually, and the reason I chose grazing and cropping areas was I find normally if you're in a forestry area or within range of processing, it's not that too hard. It's not the case everywhere. I was in Uruguay and timber products had, I think it was pulp, had just surpassed beef as their major export, and yet they're still scratching their heads how they can get more farmers to plant trees there too, and they've got access to a lot of pulp mills, and the sort of increased revenue that they're making off that land from having silver pasture integrated agroforestry is quite significant. So it was like $400 or $500 US dollars a hectare more than what they're making out of the stock. So there's significant gains to be made, but at the moment it's cultural, it's short-term finance. The carbon project's 25 years, and that's a really long time for a lot of farmers. Seasons change quickly, markets change even quicker. So to be trying to think 25 years ahead, and succession's another really big one. So locking into projects like that, or locking into management, as we learn a lot about the management about our pines. You've got to do that over a long period to get peeler grade pine, to get a high quality building pine or engineered products wood. So it's a long-term commitment, and the incentives are just not there at the moment. Even with the closing up of native forest, a lot of native forests in Australia and a couple of our states, it's double the price of timber that we're getting for our radiata pine, but it's still a long way short of and again, it's other things like transparency in the supply chain. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have a really good answer for you. I've been able to highlight a lot of the issues, but I think just keeping farmers getting farmers into the conversations when it comes to planning. If we could get more if we could get better methodologies, farm forestry methodologies that were viable on smaller areas, things like that would make a big difference, maybe.
Yep. Harry, we're sort of hearing a lot of challenges both on the demand side and the supply side. I guess from you've obviously done a work sort of in lots of sort of regions. Is this a common sort of challenge? I guess this sort of topic we've got is really sort of barking up the right tree. So I'm trying to sort of work out which tree is the right tree, because it's clearly like some existential challenges that are kind of holding the industry back.
Yes and no. I mean, I think Michael's case is a real example, and I've heard plenty of that. Mick Stevens at TQ has done a fair bit of work on this in Queensland. I think it's a good one to look into. But fundamentally, the buildings that we need built, we're looking at mid-rise, let's just say 8 stories, 10 stories, nothing higher. They're coming from plantation conifer pine. And, I mean, I can talk to Australia, but, that's... You're looking at southern pine on the east coast, or radiata pine down in massive plantations of HQ plantations. But it's 1 or 2 operators in the UK, or 1 or 2 operators in Europe, the same in Brazil, and they've got the supply. In Australia, the building will regrow I'll take one of the buildings that we had for our prize winners. It came from Kim Baber of Baber Studios. It's the Maryborough Fire Station in Queensland. The regrowth rate in terms of the tree just for the building is 47 minutes with plantations, and the tree's been going in, right? There's enough supply to some extent to meet current demand, but we need more plantations established drastically, and that hasn't happened for decades. And that's just not an Australia issue, that's everywhere. So let's put a positive spin on the barking up the right tree. I think that there's many material efficiency aspects which can be addressed in sawmills. The off-cut rate, or sort of the out-of-grade rate versus structural versus non-structural. When you're dicing up the log for in-grade and out-of-grade, there's gains to be made there per sawmill, hands down everywhere. And in Queensland and Australia, 40%, there's sawmills in Queensland where 40% savings could result in upwards of 300,000 houses a year. In the UK, it's even more drastic because most of the supply is going towards fencing and pallets or firewood, right? Engineered timber is a fantastic market, and there's a lot of value add which can be added there. It's not just for the big sawmills and sausage, the sausage factories. It's small glue lam and agile machiners and through to the training which would happen at tertiary colleges and so forth, right across the value chain. I don't want to hold the limelight here, but there is a lot of examples that we can talk to in Chile with the centre, which has been set up in the last 4 or 5 years, Stand-Up, and there's a lot of money which is poured into that, and there's terrific examples there. And engineered buildings of timber, every month or every 6 months, you're seeing a new height going forward. I don't think you need to be going any higher than 10 stories. It's inefficient, and you have to increase the depth and the structural size of the members just to satisfy fire ratings. But it's the innovation, I think, is where we're slimming down the members, having really thin CLT or a hybrid structure. Use timber and back timber where it's needed and it's appropriate, and combine that with others where it makes sense. And there's a lot of different options with timber. There's a suite of mass plywood, NLT, now laminated timber, Dow laminated timber, cross laminated timber, glue lam, and lightweight frame. From on the panel here, we've got good examples of all of that.
Yeah. So there is hope. So that's good. Thanks, Harry, for bringing us back to the opportunities there and what we're seeing around the world at the moment. I guess, Amy, bringing the conversation back to you. I guess, from what you're hearing, and also what you referred to in your remarks at the beginning, like the multilateral system and its sort of role in this space. Are you sort of seeing from an FAO perspective sort of trends towards sort of greater acknowledgement around the opportunities around sustainable wood and timber and the decarbonisation agenda, or are we still sort of seeing those sort of reluctance or sort of the risk that comes with sort of a new industry sort of taking off?
I mean, I think now we're sort of in a moment where there's a lot of opportunity, I would say, but I sort of want to reinforce a little bit of this perception issue that really it's quite a barrier. I mean, I actually liked what you were mentioning, Harry, about this Built by Nature prize. I think these kinds of things are very nice because they are sort of demonstrable, kinds of examples that actually can be implemented that are very tangible. But I still think this, on the supply side, the promotion of sustainable forest management, even though I think it's something like 50% of wood is coming from plantations, still this idea of the natural forest management and the lesser known species and all of that. I mean, there are also very positive stories about sustainable forest management. I mean, when we were here in March, we had sort of a pre-COP mission with several high-level authorities from FAO, and we visited I was with our director of the Forestry division. We visited a concession in Rondônia, one of the very first forestry concessions in Brazil. And it's like a beautiful standing forest in the middle of soy. Driving through all this soy, and then you get to this like huge, incredible beautifully managed forests with reduced impact logging methods, high technology, a lot of young foresters, a lot of women, young women foresters, you know, leading us through the concessions and showing us sort of the state-of-the-art technologies that are being employed. And that's really mimicking natural disturbance and natural forest dynamics and producing incredible wood that's also being exported. And so, but those kinds of, I feel like, you know, I lived in Brazil 20 years ago, and I feel like there was almost more of a wave around sustainable forest management then than there is now. I think now the agenda has sort of shifted much more towards restoration, and as opposed to this, you know, understanding that standing forests have value. That's the director of the Brazilian Forest Service, Garo Batmanian, is always saying that standing forests have value, and the sustainable management of standing forests, you know, as a supply side for this timber is also critically important. So it's really working on both of those sides, but I think still a lot of change in perception that's needed to really make it fly.
Thanks, Amy. I'm just going to glance at the audience briefly as well, and please catch my sort of attention if you've got a question you want to ask to the panel. But we'll, I guess, conscious of time, but keen to get, I always, for all the panels I've done over the last sort of week or so, asked panel members if they had sort of a magic wand, what would be sort of the one thing they wish they could sort of just happen overnight to sort of transform or address the existential sort of challenge or opportunity. Michael, I might start with you. Like you mentioned sort of the lack of incentive for sort of other farmers to sort of follow what your farm business has done, and the price signals and the risk and the timelines. But clearly your family business made the decision to go into the space sort of many decades ago, and you've reaped the benefits around sort of resilience and managing through sort of periods of drought and low stock numbers. So there has been a reward, and I didn't get the impression there was sort of deep regret from the path you went down. And you're still on this journey. So I think the question is, well, maybe it's two-pronged. Would you do anything differently, and what would be the magic wand that sort of would just unlock the opportunity that your family business has experienced?
Yeah, thanks. I think, yeah, there's loads of things we would do differently. We were learning. We were good at growing sheep and cattle. But we've learned a hell of a lot. And no, we wouldn't change that journey at all. And we wouldn't still have the sawmill. We wouldn't still be planting trees. We're still put in a few thousand trees every year. But I think just generally linking, you know, you're talking about ecosystem services and natural capital. It was great to go to our forestry conference in Australia a couple of years ago, and there's so many foresters talking about agriculture and trying to figure out how to run animals in their forests. It was pretty funny. But I was actually in Argentina, Misiones, and I heard a really moving story there about a forestry family that during the crisis in Argentina, they weren't able to keep their staff on, and there was a massive market turn down, and but to keep their staff, they realised that they could start running cattle in their forests, and they couldn't pay their staff, but they could feed them. It was a food security issue, and I think we need to remember food's important, but fiber's important too, and we're up against. There was a presentation here yesterday on green steel, and I almost put my hand up to say, we've got the solution. it's wood. Yeah, look, we're up against a lot of things. Being a merino producer as well, I'm up against synthetic fibres. We're up against a lot of industries that are really fossil fuel driven. And unfortunately in Australia, I think we're leading, we're not leading the way, but we're fourth highest in terms of fuel subsidies for agriculture. And I think it's right up there with mining. So that's what we're up against. It's fossil fuel subsidies. And but yeah, look, I'm still making it work. I'm still growing wool, and I'm still growing trees. I'm still harvesting those trees. we're planting those trees. I think something we've learned about from the natural capital side of things. It's important to keep that carbon cycling. So it's not. I don't shear my sheep and they're gone. I shear my sheep every year for 10, 12 years. And I cut my trees down, but I don't cut all of them down, and I'm planting trees all the time. It's a cycle. So I think we need to just keep telling that story and explain the how we live.
Thanks, Michael. Rachel, I might pass to you now. I guess similar question. If you had a magic wand from where you sit, sort of in the New Zealand system, what would you do with it? And I guess what would success look like in 10, 20 years?
So it's hard to pick one thing, but I think if I had to pick one thing, in New Zealand, we're managing the planting and the land management decisions that were made 30 years ago, and we're doing the best with those decisions now. So I would like a magic wand that could have gone back 30 years ago and planted and managed the land in a way that we might now. So we would have a mosaic landscape where commercial forests sit alongside natural native forests that sit around waterways and protect them. We would have forests managed for carbon, managed for biodiversity, managed for timber. It would be a mosaic landscape where the multi-values of trees and all types of trees are recognised, and we're not sort of dealing with the blanket planting decisions that we are dealing with today. Those are quite hard to manage in the most sustainable, environmentally friendly way.
Thanks, Rachel. Francisco, I guess your perspectives, running a business 125 years old, what do you see the business looking like in another 10, 20 years and the magic wand?
Well, hopefully, first of all, I have to say that we have to continue probably training our own people and incorporating engineering aspects in the operations. My impression is that also we have to work much more closely to the public people from the governors, in the sense that we need to promote the construction in good, and so what I see in 10, 15 years, and considering the trend, what we have seen during the last years, my impression is that we will continue growing the wood construction in wood, but it's absolutely, I would say two things are crucial. One, promoting this activity and having more technology in our processes, and also incentives from in public policies, in this sense. So I see good opportunities for the industry, especially considering that it comes from it's a natural product from forests that will be for sure more forests in a sustainable way managed, and the possibility of sequestering carbon and all of this is a fantastic possibility.
Okay. I'm going to be unpredictable and throw to Amy very quickly, and then give Harry the last word. Amy, I guess the magic wand from like an FAO perspective, in COP sort of 40, what do you hope to be discussing around this topic?
Well, I mean, last week there was the first ministerial meeting of the Intergovernmental Council for Buildings and Climate, which was actually really interesting. But there were sort of tons of ministers and high-level officials around the table, and very few spoke about wood and forest issues. And I think a few did, but I think that would be something, where the issue of wood is really right there in this understanding of construction as in climate action, and some of that will be just, this is, unfortunately, we always say we need more information. I mean, we don't need more information to act, but it would be really nice if I could have a magic wand that the uncertainties around some of this carbon accounting could be resolved tomorrow, because I think some of that is why we get this polemic arguments around it. And so if we could have that less uncertainty around that carbon accounting, I think it would really help push this at the political level. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Amy. And Harry, I guess unless there's any questions from the audience, I'll give you sort of the final word around the magic wand. What does success look like in 10 years? I guess I'll answer this sort of question: are we barking up the right tree? It sounds like we are, but it's just it's a very tree that you may not be able to see the top of just yet.
Yeah, look, I think to have this session in the Australian Pavilion I'm very happy to have it. I would like to see more. So I'm going to say, let's look 1 year ahead. I would like to see timber on the agenda for Australia, if it's hosting COP, or if it's in Turkey, if it's in Bonn, wherever, but a serious timber agenda. It's been elevated this COP. I would also like to see Australia back the principles for responsible timber construction. I would like to see that in the next 12 months. 10 years ahead, I would like to see timber standard. As an Australian, it is, more or less, in lightweight frame single dwellings, but around the world it's not. So for mid-story construction, I would expect timber can be standard in 10 years, and there's a lot of benefits from right across the value chain for that. And we can leave it there. Happy to chat afterwards.
Okay, great. Thanks, Harry. We're right out of time, so I'd like to thank our panellists, Harry, Francisco, Rachel, Michael, and Amy. And thank you to the audience as well for being part of the discussion this afternoon. Thanks.